Hey everyone, welcome to Insights with Benny, a space where ideas meet action, where stories inspire reflection, and perspectives challenge the status quo. Whether you're here for clarity, challenge, or quiet wisdom, this is your place. Today's episode is titled, When the Wind Owns the Sail. When principles are traded for popularity, causes lose their anchor. In When the Wind Owns the Sail, discover how trend jerkers drifting from conviction strengthen the very forces they once opposed, eroding public trust. As always, these are straight from the heart of Insight's blog. Let's begin. Sold to the Wind. In the city of Price, where stories traveled faster than footsteps, Jake Vane was known for his grasp in the world of finance. Numbers worked in his favor, and so did the clients who trusted their future to his charts and forecasts. One day, out of curiosity, he began recording short videos, simple tips about saving, investing, and avoiding debt. He spoke into the camera as if speaking to a friend. People listened. The numbers in his follower count began to grow. Then came the call from a media agency. "You have a talent," they told him. "We can get you bigger audiences, bigger income." The gigs began as small campaigns, then brand endorsements and talk show panels. But the crown jewel came in the form of an advocacy campaign. Save the Wilds. The cause was urgent. Rare animals were being slaughtered by both hunters and poachers. Jake, now dressed in earth-tone jacket, spoke with passion in his voice about protecting the creatures of the forest. The campaign went viral. Documentaries featured him, schools invited him to speak, and the agency paid him more than he had ever dreamed of. The life was intoxicating, so he quit his finance job. For years, he was the face of the cause. Children sent him drawings of elephants and rhinos. He raised funds for sanctuaries, signed petitions, and posted fierce messages condemning the butchers of the wild on his social media accounts. But then one season, the agency's funding dwindled. A change in political winds had dried the river of sponsorship. Jake's inbox grew quiet. The invites stopped. Bills began to stack like bricks in a crumbling wall around him. The thought of returning to finance felt like moving back into a cold, gray prison. He was a different man now, or at least he had convinced himself he was. Then came the knock on his door. It was the Hunters League, the very people he had spent years denouncing. They had seen his decline. "You have influence," their leader said. "We can make use of it. You'll tell our story, the truth about our way of life. We'll pay you well." Desperation dulled the edges of his conscience. He agreed. Soon Jake was online again, smiling beside men in camouflage, praising sustainable hunting and the ancient rights of the hunt. The audience who once cheered his rants against hunters now watched in confusion. Comments flooded in. "What happened to you? Didn't you call them criminals?" Jake said nothing. Yet the irony is profound. He sees himself as a man of principle. In his world, he stands firm and speaks with passion about what he believes. To him, that is proof that he is true to himself, even if the self he is true to kept shifting. Meanwhile, the hunters and those who enjoyed their game adored him. Invitations poured in. Payments followed. Even the poachers, sensing an opportunity, began offering him gigs to clear the air about their work and how they were also feeding communities. He accepted those too. From the outside, Jake looked alive again. Busy, booked, smiling in every post. But inside, he was hollow. His soul felt like a theater that had been emptied after the final act. Its stage now leased to whoever could pay the rent. It has a theater owner so desperate, he would rent the stage by the minute to street hawkers. And in the quiet moments, darker questions whispered in the minds of those who still remembered the man Jake used to be. Why does he do this? Does he have a soul? What comes next? Would he, if the money was right, stand in the square and praise the raiders who stole the meat from the very hunters he now defended? He could argue that, after all, the raiders shared their spoils with the hungry. In Price, no one could say for sure. But one thing they knew, Jake Vane had become a man who didn't follow causes. He followed currents. And currents, like trends, change without warning. A talent adrift. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Malcolm X. Jake Vane's story began as a talent meeting opportunity, a gifted analyst with the trust of clients who stumbled into public visibility. The real turning point wasn't fame, it was the pivot. He shifted direction because of an offer, driven by necessity rather than principle. As a result, performance replaced purpose. The stage was still his, but the script was for sale. That journey exposes a modern pathology, trend jerking. The act of seizing causes not from conviction, but from the pull of crowds, sponsors, and the spotlight. Jake's story illustrates how easily a talent can be captured by external interests, and how quickly a cause can be reduced to mere content. It illustrates how passion, without guiding values, can drift. When offers steer a stance, the wind owns the sail. The anatomy of the drift. Trend jerkers aren't simply fickle influencers. They are what happens when visibility outpaces values. The talent remains. In Jake's case, a sharp mind and persuasive voice, but once attention becomes the currency, the cause becomes negotiable. From the outside, it appears to be adaptability. However, on the inside, it's a lack of stability. Jake began in familiar territory, producing financial content. The problem was not branching out, but going all in on a new area and abandoning what he knew. His entry into a cause came not from lived experience, deep insight, or new revelation. It was because the opportunity was available. Jake's credibility in finance earned him a platform. The wildlife campaign handed him a script. Without roots, influence rests on stage props. If Jake had ventured into the financial side of wildlife conservation, or entered the wildlife campaign space while still anchoring his core work in finance, the drift might never have occurred. He would have had a natural fallback, and returning to finance content would have been an easy and credible shift. Jake's story is a cautionary tale of a dangerous pattern in the online world. Individuals spot topics that draw attention and quickly dive in with little understanding of their complexities. They pursue impressions, likes, and comments, especially on emotive and controversial issues that thrive on crowd appeal, without forming genuine convictions. Like Jake, many hop from one trending topic to the next, not as a natural progression, but purely to capture a new audience, reshaping their stance each time the crowd changes. Another hallmark of trend jerkers is stance shopping, by adopting and discarding positions like gigs. When support shifts, so does the stance, not because of new evidence, but because a different audience is paying attention. Jake didn't evolve his view on conservation. He switched sides to match the payout. Trend jerkers allow performance to replace practice. True conviction fuels the work of advocacy. Performance chases optics, panels, high-profile appearances, viral posts. Over time, identity becomes sponsor-focused. Jake's rhetoric slid from butchers of the wild to ancient rites of the hunt, mirroring his new supporters' appeal and preference. The drift in stance is usually bound together by self-justification. Passion is mistaken for principle. I feel this strongly now, so it must be right. Rhetoric lines drawn for applause are used, which shatters when incentives change. If the next loudest buyer can purchase the platform, the earlier stance is revealed as a costume. Jake's pivot exposed an existing emptiness within him, a lack of movement without a compass. This doesn't mean people can't change, but genuine growth is slower, accountable, and transparent. It begins with honesty, which says, here's what I learned. Here's what I got wrong. Here's what I'm doing differently. When opportunity outruns origin, when the crowd ghostwrites, and when metrics masquerade as morals, advocacy becomes a theater. The skepticism it breeds doesn't just harm the performer. It burdens every honest voice that follows. The damage beyond the drift. The damage from trend jerking runs far deeper than a tarnished public image or a passing controversy. Its effects ripple outward, touching the individual, the causes they champion, and the wider society. These consequences can be seen on three fronts: to the person, to genuine causes, and to society at large. to the person. The cost begins with identity fragmentation. Selling contradictory scripts forces constant rationalization and emotional compartmentalization. The result is a performer with a full calendar and an empty core, like a theater still lit but with nothing true being staged. Over time, this hollowness breeds emotional distress and quiet indignity as purpose gives way to survival performance. Sustaining a false narrative requires constant self-deception, which corrodes self-esteem and creates deep inner conflict. If that tension is left unresolved, it can lead to self-destructive coping behaviors. In Jake's case, the strain might drive him to lash out, turning petty or combative towards Save the Wilds and even unrelated groups. Instead of focusing on promoting the Hunters League, his energy would spiral into attacking anyone perceived as an adversary. And, as with any conflict left unchecked, such battles inevitably harm bystanders and claim innocent casualties. To genuine causes, the harm is structural. Complex problems are reduced to marketable soundbites. What is solvable becomes merely sellable. Genuine grassroots work, the kind that doesn't Photoshop well, is starved of attention and resources. At the same time, high-visibility optics dominate the market. In some cases, the fallout from Jake's own internal battles causes further damage. The flaws he publicly assigns to Save the Wilds end up staining the public image of every similar cause. This fuels a cycle of credibility collapse. Each public U-turn teaches audiences to view advocacy with cynicism rather than trust. The next honest voice to speak out inherits suspicion, tainted by the memory of Jake's opportunism. As a result, focus shifts from interventions that achieve real change to those that merely look good on stage or screen. To society, especially in contexts of gilded deprivation, the danger is profound. In such environments, elites maintain systemic inequality and neglect through carefully constructed appearances of progress. Trend jerkers become tools in this strategy, amplifying the illusion and providing reputation laundering in exchange for payment. Their sudden reversals weaken public resistance, turning healthy skepticism into paralyzing cynicism. Authentic reformers and activists are then forced to spend valuable time and energy proving they are not for sale before they can even begin building trust or momentum. Meanwhile, well-funded narratives dominate the conversation, drowning out the voices closest to harm and leaving the oppressed quieter, more compliant, and easier to control. Jake's pivot clearly illustrates the patterns described. The issue wasn't that he changed direction. It was that the change was driven by an enticement, not by insight or conviction. The greatest danger of a cause without conviction isn't merely its emptiness, it's the harm it inflicts. Such shifts actively strengthen the very forces the cause was meant to challenge, giving the hostile forces credibility, reach, and momentum they might not have achieved on their own. Reflection, anchoring the sail. The heart of Jake's story is not betrayal, it's the drift. His downfall was never simply that he changed lanes. It was that he allowed the strongest current to choose his course. Talent without governance is vulnerable to capture, and once captured, it becomes an amplifier for whoever can pay the fee. Trend jerkers are like children handed a loaded rifle. At first, the shooting may seem harmless, even exciting, until they begin firing at anything in sight. In the process, they harm not only the cause, but also themselves and the society around them. The safeguard is simple in concept, but hard. Anchor before you sail. When the destination is clear, storms don't dictate the navigation. Legitimate pivots grow from evidence, not expedience, and they should be explained with transparency. Furthermore, impacts should be measured by real changes, not trending hashtags. In advocacy, movement without a fixed course is just drifting. In Jake's world, the wind looked like freedom, but in reality, it was a current without a compass, sweeping him toward whatever harbor would take him in. If the wind can buy your words, the wind owns your work. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them on social and tag me. Please subscribe to my channels, like, share, and help spread the message. Until next time, stay reflective.